Thanks for listening to Live Forever Young Radio. Approximately 75% of Americans eat excess amounts of sugar, many of whom could be classified as sugar addicts. In today's show, learn the close relationship sugar addiction and drug addiction share and how to restore your willpower and beat those cravings. Bob and Rollie share some helpful ways to decrease sugar intake, identify hidden sugars, and reduce cravings so you can avoid being overfed and undernourished. So sit back, relax, and get ready to live forever young.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Live Forever Young Radio. I'm Bob Gilpatrick. I'm here with Rollie Culp.
How's it going,
nice
Bobo?
Hat, Rollie.
Thank you.
Looking good today.
Spiffy.
All right. Have you had your sugar fix for the podcast here? So
actually,
you have enough energy to get through the podcast?
I'm glad you asked. Actually, no. I actually haven't been eating sugar a lot. One of the things I don't seem to have too much of a problem with is sugar, but over 75% of Americans do. And it's actually kind of what we're talking about today. It's America's sugar addiction. Causes a lot of issues with people's health, and more than that, it can cause a lot of issues with relationships too, because people get kind of, they
moody,
get kind of moody,
depressed, anxious.
Yep. So anyway, that's what we're talking about today.
Yeah, and ultimately, the problem with sugar, even though there's a lot of problems, is that sugar in excess causes inflammation. And inflammation, we've talked about before on another show, and we know that inflammation is the cause of about 95% of all diseases.
Yeah, like we talk about on every show, when we start talking about diseases, many of them, the root is inflammation. And so when you think about all the things that inflammation causes, and then you think about what happens when you take sugar in, it's no wonder why people who are sugar addicted have lots of health problems.
Yep. Cardiovascular disease,
yep.
The number one killer, certain types of cancer.
Diabetes, like my dad.
Yep. And problems with your liver,
mm-hmm.
right? Problems with memory and focus, and even some studies show that it can lead to Alzheimer's disease.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of evidence showing cognitive decline and depression specifically too related to sugar addiction because of what it does up in here, but we'll get to that.
also have issues with low energy. People will eat sugar and then they'll get a little bit of a jolt of energy, then they have this big sugar slide.
A sugar crash.
Yeah. And when people literally get addicted to the sugar because it's binding to receptors in your brain
mm-hmm.
that are part of the reward system, right? The dopamine system. And we know that if people are addicted to sugar and you look at a brain scan, it looks very similar, and some say even worse than if you're addicted to a hard drug like cocaine.
Right. One of the things we'll put it up on the screen right now, but one of the things you'll see if you look at the brain scans between the relationship to people who are addicted to something like cocaine and addicted to something like sugar is those same dopamine receptors are dulled, and you'll see there's no red in the middle there. It's only yellow and green. So if you look at a healthy one next to a sugar addicted or a cocaine addicted brain, it looks very different from a healthy one, but very similar in those two addictions.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when you look at why do people get addicted to sugar? Well, first off, sugar tastes good, right?
Right.
So people start out by having, experience when they're younger and they like sweet things, but then all of a sudden they have to have more and more and more and more.
Mm-hmm.
A big issue is drinking soda pop, right?
Right.
So people in the United States still get 25% of their calories from drinking soda pop. That doesn't even count other sugary drinks, sports drinks, and other sweetened drinks.
Right. One of the things, too, that people don't really realize is that a lot of the times when you're standing in front of a vending machine, that's one of the decisions you really don't want to make. think about it. Like, you're working all day long. You have kids. You have to figure out, what time to get up, what time to take them, what time to be to work. You have to figure out who you're going to call in the morning to let them know what's going on. You've got a lot of decisions to make. And so what ends up happening is you kind of get decision fatigue, right? It's kind of like when you go home at the end of a long day and you're like, well, what do we eat? Oh, I don't know. Let's just order a pizza. It's easier, right? So you don't have to worry about making that decision or the act of cooking, right? And so what you're actually talking about here is willpower, right? Your willpower is this measurable thing. And some studies have shown, recent studies actually, that it can be depleted, right? And so when it's depleted, you start getting this decision fatigue and you make bad decisions and give in to temptation because you don't really have the energy to do anymore.
And it makes it worse.
It's kind of like we talk about a show we had called Compassion Fatigue, where you're constantly giving compassion to others and then you kind of get depleted and then you don't really have compassion for when you really need it, like for your child or if someone passes away. It's just a normal thing. Well, it's the same kind of thing with, you wouldn't eat a half-baked, greasy pizza if you really knew how bad it was, would you? Probably not. But you're so tired that you don't care. You're not going to make that decision. Right. You're just going to let that decision happen. And so when that occurs is when a lot of people find themselves getting into a hard time with losing weight, keeping it off, and eating healthy. So this kind of goes hand in hand with sugar addiction. It's kind of like being an alcoholic, yep. Right? And so how do you restore your willpower? How do you restore those depleted willpowers that you have? And one of the things that, scientifically, glucose, unfortunately, glucose helps, and we don't want a bunch of glucose because we are trying to lower our sugar. So what else can you do? You can meditate, and you can pray. And then one of the things we talk about all the time, Bob, we talk about it with the inner balance, is gratitude.
Yep, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, when people get into this habit of eating too much sugar and they just give into it, and the next thing you know, they're starting to have insulin resistance and therefore then leptin resistance, which is supposed to be signaling your brain when you've had enough to eat. And it's no longer creating that signal. Right?
No.
And so leptin and insulin are intertwined together. One can inhibit the other.
Right.
And so if people can start to break that habit, the habit of always eating sugary things, and one of the best ways to break a habit is to focus on gratitude, especially if people are eating out of anxiety, right? They're feeling anxious, so they eat. Right? And anxious is kind of tantamount to people believing that things are not okay. Well, gratitude's the opposite of that.
Right.
So it's very hard to be anxious when you're focused on gratitude. And if you're eating a lot of excess food and sugar because of anxiety, this is how it makes sense that gratitude is a good thing for you.
Also, another thing that's changed a lot since we've kind of come into an industrialized revolution, an industrialized age, is we wouldn't eat personally. We would eat with the community. So if you're living on a farm, everybody gets together in the morning, has a big breakfast, and then they have an early, actually right around 3 o'clock, they have an early dinner, and they call it dinner, but it's really like late lunch, and then they'd eat something before bed. But they'd share all the resources, so nobody's eating too much of one thing and everybody's eating together, and any scarce resource or whatever you had available, you would eat together and make a thing. Now it's almost like any time's a good time to eat. You get to work and there's a box of donuts, or you go to the doctor's office and they've got donuts and coffee out. It's like, I don't need to eat right now.
Even at the bank.
Even at the bank. You go there, you get a lollipop, you get a sucker, whatever it is.
And they have a round cylinder of pure cane sugar.
For your coffee.
For your coffee.
Exactly.
Right.
And so that there's a lot of things and a lot of factors that kind of make it hard to maintain that willpower, you know?
Especially, there's so many hidden sugars, especially fructose. So, like, there's high fructose corn syrup in a lot of things at the grocery store.
Right.
And that fructose is particularly bad for your liver. And there are hundreds of thousands of people every year that are diagnosed with liver disease with the result it came from too much sugar.
Exactly.
And what can happen is you get scarring in your liver from overconsumption of fructose, and that scarring eventually blocks off the blood flow to the liver. And so there are people, about a quarter of all the people that get this scarring from too much fructose actually end up needing to be considered for a liver transplant. And it's the third leading cause of liver disease in the United States.
That's amazing.
And
that's crazy.
So this is the type of things that people need to really understand, including when you consume too much sugar, you get this syndrome of insatiable hunger.
Yes.
Right? Because you're eating empty calories, right? And so your body's constantly craving good nutrition.
Right.
So it's saying, I need more, I need more.
It's not like I'm waking up and getting fuel to go out and have a good day. It's like I'm hungry, so I'm going to eat dinner, and I'm still hungry, so I'm going to get a bag of chips, and you know what? Now I'm ready for dessert. It's like,
right,
what?
Exactly. And so now what happens is you're eating all day long because you're always hungry, and you're malnourished at the same time, and you have high inflammation, and therefore you're at high risk for numerous different diseases. So,
of course.
You know, what we can talk about, Rollie, is, so what can we do about all this?
Well,
right?
yeah, I mean, that's the main thing that we want to do, is figure out what we can do. So one of the things that you can do is avoid the hidden sugars that we're talking about, right?
Yep.
And kind of also getting back to the insatiable hunger and how that works. So, like, the hormone leptin is actually what's supposed to tell you to stop eating. Like, hey, we're full, it's time to go outside and do some work, right? But that hormone can actually be blocked by insulin.
Yep.
And insulin is the same hormone that tells the cells to open up and let all the sugar in so we can go be active and have energy, right?
Right.
But when you are diabetic and you're suffering from insulin resistance, the insulin isn't opening the cells of the body to let the sugar that's in the body in, but what it's doing is blocking the leptin.
Right. And glycating your proteins.
And making that sugar.
What creates that inflammation.
Exactly.
Yep.
And so how do we avoid stuff like that? Well, we want to reduce sugar slowly, obviously, because it's like if you're addicted to something and you go cold turkey, it's impossible.
Yeah, you'll have similar, experiences if you were withdrawing from drugs.
Exactly.
And you probably won't be able to maintain it, and you'll go right back. So that's why you want to go slow, and you want to learn about where the hidden sugars are. So fructose is the most dangerous of the sugars, and it's in a lot of things. Almost anything you buy at the grocery store that's a packaged good, right, that's in the frozen food section, they'll have high fructose corn syrup that's in it, and certainly in the soda pops and other sugary drinks. So the easiest way to do it is to look at how much sugary drinks are you having each day, right? And begin and say it's 4. Some people drink a lot more than that, but say you're drinking 4 drinks a day that would be considered sugary. Next thing you want to do is just cut back by a half, right, for 3 or 4 days, and then cut the other half so that now you're down from 4 till 3, and take a week to do that. Because if you cut back all at once, that addiction's going to kick in, and you're going to be right back where you started.
Hard to fight that.
So you have to do it slowly, and you also want to educate yourself about what are the highest sugar things. For example, grapes are very high in sugar.
You wouldn't think that because they're fruit and they're healthy, but there is a lot of natural sugar in grapes, man.
Right. Yeah. And so there's a really good book that's called The Sugar Impact Diet. And it's a book that shows you where all the hidden sugars are and shows you.
No, it's right here.
Sugar. Yeah, we brought it in here.
Sorry.
And so it
Sugar Impact Diet.
And so
Very good.
it's going to show you where the hidden sugars are and what foods to replace certain foods that have the highest sugar.
That's what I was going to say. You got to look for like a replacement or something to take place of that. And one of the things that you want to do too is avoid, believe it or not, artificial sweeteners. You want to avoid them because even though there's no sugar in them, they're sweet. And when your body tastes the sweetness, it creates insulin to open up and let the sugar, but there's no sugar because you're eating an artificial sweetener.
Yeah.
So you're faking your body out.
And you're getting insulin resistance.
And now you're increasing insulin resistance because there's all this insulin that has nothing to do. Yep. And so now the leptin that will tell you you're full is at higher amounts. So you have to be it's like a vicious cycle, right? And you got to know how these things work together, or else you're going to get caught in the middle of it. Right.
And so another thing, Rollie, is you can look at your ideal plate. What's your dinner plate going to look at? Now, a lot of people, they say you're going out for dinner. The first thing that people do is they order a drink. I'm going to have a martini. I'm going to have a beer. I'm going to have a glass of wine.
Right? Yes, that's true.
All of which are going to cause a rise in your blood sugar.
Right.
And then the next thing is they'll bring out the bread.
Gotta have some bread. And lots of carbs.
And so now you've started out, before you've ever eaten anything that's good for you, you're already loaded up on sugar and
You've
high
got a
glycemic
big
index
Jack
carbs.
and Coke with sugar and
exactly.
sugar cane.
So and then it's time for dinner, and you're going to have another drink with dinner, and you're going to have some mashed potatoes and some vegetables and some meat, and then it's time for dessert. Okay. Now what happens is by the end of your meal, way more than half of your calories were taken in from eating high glycemic index carbs. Okay. And then that type of eating becomes a habit at home as well. And if you are also using convenience foods, prepared foods, there's lots of high fructose corn syrup in those foods as well.
Make them taste better.
Right. And so reducing the sugar slowly, really important, paying attention to your plate and moving more towards good fats and lean proteins and less carbohydrates is going to help you to be on the beginnings of a semblance of a ketogenic diet.
Right. And you're saying pay attention to your plate. And that's actually really important. And one of the things you might want to think about doing is get smaller plates. Yeah, because I was actually reading a study they did. It was actually an experiment. They had people come in and eat soup. Okay? One group of people had a regular bowl, filled it up, ate it. When they got towards the end, they asked them if they were feeling full. The person looked down, almost done. They said, yeah, I'm getting full. Well, in the second group, the bowl was rigged to where it would refill a little bit of soup every time somebody took a spoonful. And so they're sitting there and they're eating, and they're eating, and they're eating about halfway done. Even though it's a full bowl of soup they would have eaten by now, halfway through, because it's been refilling, they look down at it and they say, the person asks them, are they full? They look down at their bowl, they say, no, I'm not even halfway done yet. How could I be full?
Right.
So it's
the brain's easily fooled.
It's very easily
There's
fooled.
a whole study of this, and people will look at what colors of plates are the ones that will make people eat the most and the ones will eat the least. A red plate, it has a subconscious connotation to stop. And people tend to eat less when they have a red plate.
Wow.
Okay? People will tend to eat less sugary foods and be satisfied depending on the music that's being played. Certain music makes you believe that your food is sweeter than it really is.
Wow.
And so restaurants use a lot of these techniques, and you want to pay attention to a lot of that. You can research all that. You can get the Sugar Impact Diet. And another thing is, Rollie, is in addition to changing slowly what you eat, you want to eat slowly, right? Because
correct.
If you first off, we did this on digestion. We talked about this on the
breaking
down
digestion,
where you want to chew your food really well, so the food is getting digested by the bacteria and the enzymes in your mouth. Then you're going to take your digestive enzymes with it so that you can fully digest your food. And the slower you eat, the less you're going to eat. And the reason is it takes a while from the time you're full, it takes a while for enough leptin to get to your brain to tell you you're full. And usually people are actually full 5 minutes before the brain gets the signal. So if you're eating slowly and taking breaks and putting your silverware down, you're going to feel full, perhaps when your plate still has food on it, and you'll have eaten less food. And if you're paying attention to what you're eating, you'll have had less sugar as well.
And speaking of paying attention to what you're eating, one of the main things too is to just become well nourished, right? Like eat foods that have real not calories, sorry, that have real nutrients and real vitamins and real minerals to them. And you know, like that's why a lot of people supplement. That's why a lot of people use supplements.
And we hear this all the time when people use our Gladiator barley, the sprouted seeds, right, which are very low glycemic index when they're sprouts, right? And they use Boomer Boost. Their body gets so well nourished that they eat way less food.
Yes.
We've heard people say that they now eat half as much food once they've gotten themselves well nourished.
Right, and that means less groceries too. I've actually had people say they spend a lot less money on groceries because they don't eat quite as much food, and that's always a good thing. I mean, the one thing that I've heard is one really foolproof way to elongate your life is to reduce calorie intake.
Yep.
You know, increase nutrients and vitamins, but decrease calorie intake. And in America, we've got a lot of high caloric food with not a lot of nutrients and vitamins and minerals, and that's why we have the issue we have with obesity and malnourished. Being overfed but malnourished is what we say.
Exactly. Rollie, last thing I was thinking of, we also did a show on tapping, on the emotional freedom technique.
Got to use that.
People can use the emotional freedom technique to begin to reprogram themselves.
Yeah, because a lot of the times it's a habit, right? And you got to reset yourself.
And it's in your head, so you can convince yourself using the tapping technique with affirmations to begin to reset how you think about food and how much you think you need to eat.
Actually, we have a video. If you go to Boomers Forever Young YouTube, just go to YouTube, search Boomers Forever Young, you'll find a playlist with, I believe it's helpful videos.
No, it's under emotional freedom technique.
Oh, that's right. We have its own, bad.
Its own playlist.
Bob's got it right. We have our own playlist called Emotional Freedom Technique, or EFT. And if you click on that, it'll go through the kind of the intro, the basics, and then there's about 3 or 4 different ones. Tapping for weight loss, anxiety, I think depression's on there, and I think there's one more. But you'll have to find it to check it out.
The immune system.
Don't tell them they got to go.
Oh,
they got to go look for it.
But most importantly, there's one on tapping for weight loss.
That's important.
And so you can find it right there on that playlist.
It's not a secret. Just go to Boomers Forever Young YouTube. They're there.
So, Rollie, thank you very much for joining the show. As
I love
always.
it.
And thank you, everyone, for watching and listening to Live Forever Young Radio. We'll see you on the next show.
Thanks for listening to Live Forever Young Radio. Check us out at liveforeveryoungradio.com.